morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
Add my welcome to the welcome you probably already received this morning, and thank you for coming to John Carroll. If I can make my way around here. It's wonderful to see so many future educators in the room. This is exciting. I've been at Carroll for 17 years. For the first 10, I was a faculty member in the Department of Education and School Psychology, where I directed the teacher education programs. And then 7 years ago, I was asked to step into the Associate Dean's position for graduate education in the College of Arts and Sciences. And I'm happy to report that this summer I will be stepping down as Dean and going back to faculty and education. And I'm looking forward to that very much. So, not that I haven't enjoyed being Dean, but I've missed teaching and being out in the schools. Before we get started, can I just get a sense of our audience here? How many of you, well, you all think you want to be teachers, so that's good. How many are you thinking early childhood? Okay. How many of you are thinking middle childhood?
No way. No way.
We're going to start this over again. I happen to be a middle childhood person, so how many of you are thinking about early childhood? How many of you are thinking about middle childhood?
0.
How many of you are thinking about high school, adolescent, young adult? Okay, and the rest of you aren't sure? How many are not quite sure where they want to go yet? Oh, you're all sure. I thought I might be able to persuade somebody. In my former life, I was trained as a high school social studies teacher. I spent most of my time teaching middle school, which I absolutely love, and maybe we'll be able to convince folks to consider young adolescents as their interest also. And then I've also served as assistant principal and principal in different places. So. Obviously, I'm quite passionate about education and about teacher education, and I'm also quite passionate about the fact that John Carroll is all about training for excellent teachers. All of you young folks sitting in the room, you know that out there in the K-12 world, there is a lot of mediocrity. And we are not about mediocrity at John Carroll. We're not looking to add mediocre teachers to the teaching force. We are interested in adding excellent teachers to the teaching force, because that's what our children need and deserve. And so our teacher education program is designed to prepare young folks to be the absolute best teachers they can be for the children that they choose to serve.
Do you find that the typical student that enters the education program graduates in 4 years?
Yes. The only program where that is an issue, but it's not an issue for any of you, is middle childhood math and science. That program it's not possible to complete the program in 8 semesters, so students have to pick up at least, I think it's 3 classes in the summers.
What could they want to speech now?
That won't do it, I don't know. But I'll also say to that question, because of the way the education program is set up, we are accredited by what you might be familiar with what was called NCATE, is the National Accrediting Agency for Teacher Education Programs. That is now changing to CAPE. But because of our accreditation by CAPE and because of the requirements of the state of Ohio, our curriculum is pretty much set by our accrediting agencies. And so our students have pretty full loads over the course of their 8 semesters, because unlike other majors, they need to have all of their courses completed by the end of the fall semester of their senior year, because in the spring semester of senior year, they're doing their student teaching, and that's a full-time job. And so it's not possible to take a series of courses during that last semester. Thank you. Yes?
Could you still study abroad if you're in the education program?
Of course. You didn't study that.
I didn't.
Yes, certainly, and we encourage it, because what a gift that will bring back to your classroom, with your students. The key to that, however, is if you are going to study abroad, you need to let your advisor know early on, so that you can plan your 4 years of study accordingly, because you'll have to move some things around because of prerequisites and that kind of thing. But it's definitely possible, and a number of our students do it.
Is it possible to take summer classes at like a technical college and transfer the credits over in order to graduate a little early?
Like a community college?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Done that? Haven't you?
Yeah, I'm on an online class.
Yes, sir.
So if you mentioned the state of Ohio, what if you want to teach somewhere else?
Good question. There's what's called reciprocity, and we have reciprocity with all but 2 states. Wyoming is one of those states, and I can never remember the other one. And basically what that means is that you can take your license from Ohio and you can transfer it into a license in another state. And typically all that is involved with that is taking an additional test. We do encourage students, if you're going to go to another state, that you want to take your Ohio license with you to that other state and not just your John Carroll degree with you. You could get a license with a John Carroll degree, but it's possible that you might have additional coursework based on that state's requirements. Where if you have a license already, then all you'll need to do to transfer that license is to probably take an exam that that state requires and pay the fee.
There's always the fee, unfortunately.
Any other questions before we get you some information? Okay, then let's talk a little bit about the program and what we have to offer. We want to start by talking about our new core, which is really exciting. I was fortunate enough to be on the committee that developed this new core. Basically, when you think of your college education, there are about 4 parts to it. There is the core, there is your major, there's your teaching field for middle child and AYA folks, and then there's some electives. And our core is an exciting core. We're calling it an integrative core, unlike our current core, which is much more siloed. In our core now, the one we have today, students take a class from English, from humanities, from the sciences, from math, from history. So it's kind of disciplinary in nature. What we have done in the new core is we have integrated the various subjects. And that's really where higher education is going. And we would refer to this as best practice in college coursework, is trying to get this integration of the disciplines so that our students are much more well-rounded and are able to see the connections between different subjects. Plus, we know from learning theory that people learn better when we're able to draw those connections between different subjects. And so our core is starting this fall, so when you come to John Carroll, you'll be the first group to go through our new core. And so for the next 2 years, we're going to be running 2 cores. The old core for the juniors and seniors as they move out, and the new core for the freshmen. It's fewer credits than the old core, so we have reduced the number of credits in the core, because our old core was like 58 or 57 credits, I believe. Graduation, you needed 128 hours to graduate. We've now reduced that to 120, which again is more common among universities. And it also provides students more leeway to go in other directions with their electives and the like. And so let's talk a little bit about how the core is set up. There are going to be some foundational competencies that students will need, and these will be in the areas of writing, oral communication, and quantitative analysis. And so there is going to be 1 course in English Comp. Some students might take a second one, but 1 is going to be probably the norm. There's going to be 1 course in quantitative analysis, which in the old core was a math course. We're thinking about quantitative analysis now much more broadly. And then there'll be a 1 in oral communication. What we've also done with this new core to make it more integrated is that unlike the old core, once you were finished with your foundational competencies, it stopped there. With the new core, we're going to integrate those competencies now throughout the major. So students will revisit writing and quantitative analysis and oral communication throughout their major coursework as well. So they'll get the foundations at the beginning, and then it will be integrated into subsequent coursework. There's also going to be a foreign language requirement. Students can continue the foreign language that they started in high school, and I think we're calling it that they have to show proficiency at the intermediate level. So students can come in and take courses in their current language. They can come in and pass tests or take examinations which would allow them to waive the language requirement if they perform at this particular level, or students can come in and take a new language. And we certainly want to encourage our education students in this area of foreign language, because one of the things you're always going to want to think about is how are you distinguishing yourself from all the other people in 4 years that are going to be applying for the same jobs you are. Right? That's really what you want to be thinking about throughout your 4 years of college. How are you going to distinguish yourself? And David and Anne-Marie can talk a little about how they've done it. But that's an important key. And one way to distinguish yourself is to become fluent, or at least close to fluent, in a foreign language, because that would certainly help you, in your marketability, depending on the type of school or the type of demographic area you might find yourself teaching in. So I think that's an important thing to consider. And then there are going to be a series of integrated courses. Some are going to be team taught by faculty. Others are going to be what we're going to call linked. So they'll take 2 different courses during the same semester, which will have some commonalities among them. And they'll be around the themes of the global community, the natural world, and the human experience. This is a new concept for us, and it's really exciting. And the faculty are right now in the process of creating these new courses, and so it's bringing a lot of excitement to the faculty, but it's allowing us to kind of go off in some different directions from what we've done before. So it's an exciting time here at Carroll in terms of our new core. And then finally, there'll be the Jesuit heritage piece, which will include courses in philosophy, in theology and religious studies, in social justice, and in the fine arts. And so together, over the course of 4 years, students will move through this core in a developmental way that will serve to enhance their education. And I'll say that from an education perspective, I think this new core is particularly important, because one of the things that we try to instill in our students is how important it is for them, when they're working with their children, to integrate knowledges. So when I go and supervise David, and he's teaching a social studies class or a math class, I'm also looking for how David is integrating other subjects in there. And in fact, there's even a line on the evaluation form that I fill out that asks me to comment on that. So the fact that our students will be experiencing integrated curriculum in their own educational experience, I think is going to have a really positive effect in helping them understand the importance of integration as they work with their young folks. Any questions about that? You guys want to add anything?
First of all, I just want you to know that I am jealous that you guys get this core and we didn't, because I feel like sometimes as a student it was harder to see like how they connect. So I think it's cool that you can be like, okay, now I see like why this is relevant. And I'm also jealous about the language thing, because no one told me on my placement exam that you don't exempt anything if you do well. So yeah, so that's a good thing for you guys. And plus, also a big thing in the schools now is like English language learners, and like how you can help them learn like within your classroom, because obviously you guys will be doing a lot of observation hours, you'll be doing your student teaching, and that is something that happens in the schools. You have kids that English isn't their first language, so to know another language is a really helpful piece of being a teacher. So
yeah, that's a huge thing. Like now that we're like filling out applications, almost every single application there's like a spot. Are you fluent, and what language are you fluent in? Because there's a huge gap in people who are coming to our country, or they don't speak English as a first language, and they really do need like that extra support. So if you have that, and you can speak to that in an interview, you can put that on your application. That's going to help you. I mean, it can't hurt. It's going to help you any way that it can.
So these are our 4 programs of study, which I think it sounds as if we went around the room. Maybe you weren't aware that there was a middle childhood program. Maybe that was the issue. Maybe we don't promote that enough in our marketing. You know I'm not going to go away from it. I mean, I can't help myself. I'm sorry. So we have the early child, middle child, AYA, and then this multi-age in physical education. Just a couple things I want to say about this. For the people who are in early child and middle child, your degree will be in education. So your major is education, and you graduate with a Bachelor of Arts in Education. For those of you who are in AYA or in the multi-age physical education program, your major will be in your teaching field. So if you are looking to be a social studies teacher, your degree will be in history. We call the license integrated social studies, but your degree will actually be in history, and then you take the education courses required for the license. Does that make sense? Okay. The other thing I want to just share with you, and this is probably more information than you need right now, but in moving ahead, for those of you who are going to stay in Ohio, there is also something called an early child generalist endorsement, which means early childhood folks can take 3 additional courses and they can add grades 4 and 5 onto their license. Okay, so you get a license for pre-K through 3, and you then can take 3 additional courses either as an undergraduate or after you graduate, and the state will add an endorsement that will allow you to teach pre-K through 5. We encourage our early childhood folks to do that because it makes you more marketable.
Just to cut in, nearly every principal I've ever talked to is like, oh, we really want you for your 4 or 5 endorsement, just because it makes you, it just like sets you apart in just yet the smallest way. So,
You know, the state in all of its wisdom created this new licensure system back in 1998 without talking to the schools. And so grade 4 and grade 5 tend to be what we call self-contained, where teachers teach all of the subjects. But people with the 4-5 license can only teach 2 subjects. And people with pre-K 3 can't teach 4-5. So the state created, after the fact, this endorsement, which allows that to happen. And like Anne-Marie said, principals are looking for that. And so it's very possible to add that to your program as you go through. Yes, ma'am.
What year do you take those classes, or should you take them in the summer?
Typically, you could take them in the summer. If you're going to take them in the summer, you have to take them with us in order for us to recommend you for the endorsement. But most of the students taking those courses will be doing it in their senior year. You want to get most of your early childhood courses done first. And the same thing is true about the middle child license. You know, the middle child license allows you to teach 2 subjects. You have to choose between language arts, social studies, math, and science. And you get the equivalent of a minor in both of those. So you're taking like over 20 credits in each of those content areas that you choose. But you're only licensed to teach those 2 subjects in grades 4 through 9. So what did the state do after the fact? The state created the middle child generalist endorsement, which is more difficult for our middle childhood folks to fit in during 4 years. But if they would want to, they can take 2 additional approved courses in the other 2 subject areas and be licensed to teach all 4 subjects in grades 4, 5, and 6. I'm totally confused. Well, it doesn't matter to me anyway. At least not yet. Yes, ma'am.
What's the difference between public and private as far as licenses?
Good question. Public and private in terms of licenses. Well, all publics and charters are going to require a state of Ohio license. From what I understand, the Catholic diocese, I've had experience with the Catholic Diocese of Lansing in Michigan, and I've had experience here with the Catholic Diocese of Cleveland, and both of those dioceses require a state license. So my guess is that the majority of Catholic schools are going to require a state license. And I would assume that would be true for Lutheran schools as well. I would not want to wager what Jewish schools do. I haven't had any experience there. Where it changes a little bit with your question is, particularly for you AYA folks, is private schools. For example, in Cleveland, we have a Jesuit high school called St. Ignatius. Anybody here from St. Ignatius? At St. Ignatius, they will hire folks with a bachelor's degree in their teaching field, and then they will expect them to get a teaching license while they're teaching. And so a lot of their teachers actually come here and get their teaching license as a graduate student. Good question.
What about special education?
We do not have special education at John Carroll. My advice to my students is always, when you are looking for a master's degree, special education can be really good consideration to do at the graduate level, because it would then allow you to either move out of the regular ed classroom into a special education role, or, probably more importantly, the things you learn in that special education graduate program, you apply to your teaching in the regular ed classroom. Since so many of the classrooms are what we would call inclusive.
And going off of that, while we don't have an undergraduate, this is not good for you guys, but we don't have undergrad for special education, but there are a lot of opportunities to work with people with special needs. You might have heard, John Carroll's really into service. So I actually did something called Youth Ability. And what you do is you do service projects with people with special needs. And then so you're like working with them for another service project. So you can like volunteer, obviously bite off as much as you can chew, but there's definitely opportunities there. We have something we call Danny's Day, where people with special needs come in to John Carroll and you can be a student buddy. There's lots and lots of opportunities. We just don't have it as a major. So, for undergrad.
There is coursework in both the middle child and early childhood licenses in special ed.
They're getting that curriculum in your curriculum.
Yes, they take, well, they
Because
take,
they're looking at ways to last
it's always been required of the early childhood folks. There is a course in exceptionalities, which is required of the early child, and it will now be required of the middle child also. Because I'm sure both of these folks could talk to you about how many special ed kids they're finding in their classes, right? I mean, their classes are very inclusive. And what I really enjoy when I go to visit David is at Mayfield Middle School, they do a lot of what's called co-teaching, where the regular ed teacher and the special ed teacher teach together at the same time. And it is such an amazing benefit for the children, both the special ed and the regular ed kids. So we're moving in the right direction. You guys are really getting into our profession at an exciting time. You know, our profession is always challenged. They're always criticizing teachers, but it's an exciting time, and there is no better profession, because always remember, if it wasn't for us, we wouldn't have any doctors, lawyers, engineers, everybody. It starts with us. It's a noble profession. All right,
How many of the classrooms do you like observe? You see a lot of different teaching styles. Is there
Yep.
other teachers in school?
We're going to get to that. Hold on, because that's one of the most important parts of our program. And I'm sure these two will talk a lot about that. So just so that you see what the major requirements are. So we have what are called foundational requirements in the major in education, and this is true for all licenses. So there's an intro to education course that you will take in the first semester of your first year, or maybe the second, but hopefully the first. It gives you an overview of the profession. You get out into the schools, and for some students, it serves as a filter out of the education program. You know, they come in thinking they want to be a teacher, or they're not quite sure, and then they take this course and they learn more about the profession. Because, you know, everybody thinks they can be a teacher, right? You've all sat on the other side of the desk for 12 years. You think you know what we do. It looks easy, doesn't it? And you get summers off. If you're really doing your work, you need the summers off more than the kids do.
You earned those summers.
You work hard. And teaching is not what it looks like. It's a whole, and so sometimes when folks see what it's like on the other side of the desk, this is for me. And it's best to make that decision sooner rather than later. It's better for you, and it's better for the future students that you will serve. So Ed 100 is an important course for some in that regard. There's also a course in the social foundations of education, where you kind of look at the history of education and sociological impacts on teaching and learning. There's a course on assessment and exceptionalities, which is part of the core of the foundation piece. There is a course on multicultural education, so folks have an understanding of different exceptionalities and different types of students from the perspective of race and ethnicity and socioeconomics, etc. And so those sort of give a broad overview of our work as teachers. And then there is what's called a literacy block. Early child and middle child are required by the state of Ohio to take 4 literacy courses. AYA is required to take 1 literacy course. But basically, these courses are aimed at giving students the knowledge and skills to be able to integrate literacy reading into their teaching. Because no matter what subject you're teaching, even if it's science and mathematics, You've got to be able to read and comprehend. And so teachers, what we want to get away from, when I was taught to be a teacher, it was you're learning to teach your subject area. And where we're trying to move it is we're not teaching you to teach chemistry. We're teaching you to teach children. And there's a huge difference in that philosophy. Are you learning to teach your subject, or are you learning to teach children? And if you're going to learn to teach children, then it's a much bigger picture, right? And if I'm going to teach chemistry well, I've got to integrate math, I've got to integrate literacy into that teaching. So that's what the literacy courses serve. The methods courses, that's where you learn to teach. That's where you learn how to plan. That's where you learn instructional strategies. That's where you learn assessment strategies. And those occur mostly in your sophomore, junior, senior year. And then for the middle child and AYA folks, then there's your teaching. So as I explained earlier, if you're middle child, there are 2 subject area courses that you take, and about 20 credits in each. And then AYA, that's your major. And it looks a little different than the pure major, whatever field that you're in. And then there's student teaching, which is the final semester. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. You guys want to-
Can I? Yeah. So what I like about, guys, I'm really sorry in advance, I love our education program. But what I really like about Ed 100 is your very first semester you're in the classroom. So like there's sometimes, like I feel like that's how you really know whether or not it's for you. So for some people in my class, they're like, maybe education's not for me. And then for me, it confirmed that I want early childhood. For other people, they're like, oh, maybe not early, maybe I want high school or whatever. So the good news is you have all kinds of experiences. I've had experience in a Catholic school, public school, private, Montessori, a charter school, you kind of inner city. There's kind of a little bit of everything. And I can tell you, like, what works in some classes doesn't always work with others. Like, even like quieting kids down, like certain phrases work with some kids and not others. But you don't really know that, like what works, and you don't really know, like, I mean, you can read about education all you want in a book, but it's really like when you're with the kids that I feel like you learn the most. Because it's one thing to be in the literacy course, and they're like, okay, this is how they teach reading. This is what is normal for a kid this age. And then you go into the classroom and you actually see like, okay, the kid, I can see they're in this literacy stage, or like stuff like that. So just to learn from like experience, I think is the best way to learn. And you have so much of it for every year that you're here that like by the time you're a senior and you're student teaching, you're like, okay, I got this, because I remember like being a senior in high school and I'm like, how in the world do I plan a lesson? I don't know how long it's gonna take. Like, I don't know. I don't know, you guys are probably smarter than I was, but that's like the best way to know is just by doing it, so.
Yeah, and that was big for me too, because I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I was like, well, I'll just take this class, and then like I'll know if I like it, I'll know if I don't like it. And so it did kind of like, it was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I like the feel of these schools. I like being in the school. I like seeing all these kids around. And I was like, these kids are way too small. I can't deal with these kids. So it just kind of like confirmed what or for me, not really confirmed, but kind of like showed me the direction I wanted to go. And that was nice that it was the very first class that you take. And then even though I took it sophomore year, I wasn't too far behind. I made up for it.
Okay. I think we can probably talk about that. But I want to talk about clinical experience because both of David and Emery have touched on this. And this is really, I think, the strength of our program. And we have lots of strengths, but I think you want to always pay attention to how much time are you going to spend in the field. Because I agree with Anne-Marie 100%. We can teach you all the theory, we can give you all the book knowledge, but until you get out there and you do it and you experience it and you see it happening, it's not going to make sense. Like I know my colleagues and I, we oftentimes will have conversations about, well, should we teach classroom management? Should we have a class? The students want a class in classroom management. And I'm on the side that says, you can't teach classroom management. How do you teach people how to manage a classroom? I mean, there are all kinds of models that you can follow, things you can do, but until you're interacting with young adolescents or young children, what works for one kid is not going to work for another, and so I can't speak, although I'm sure this is going to be true for Anne-Marie also, but I can speak for David because I've been watching him grow for a year. His management is like, he doesn't have any management issues. in March. Now in October, we were talking about management, but in March, I observed him teaching and it's seamless and he never has any issues. I have another student teacher in Cleveland who was scared to death of her 7th grade class, and I was there the other day and everything was kumbaya. I mean, the change has been amazing. So clinical is where you really learn, and it's also, where you find out what you're passionate about. Because again, something Anne Marie or David said earlier, I think is important. Everybody in the room seems to know which license they are interested in. But I want to just challenge you that when you come to John Carroll and you're in 100, go into Ed 100 and visiting schools with an open mind. Because you got to be passionate about the kids you're going to be working with. I mean, I don't want to say this. I was principal of a pre-K 8 school. I gave my teachers a half day off on their birthdays. If they taught grades 5, 6, 7, or 8, I subbed for them. If they taught grades 4 down, I had to get them subbed. Don't ask me to spend more than 5 minutes in the first grade classroom. It's not going to happen. When the kindergarten teacher would be dragging kids by their arms to my office because they did something wrong, I wanted to run the other way. I went down and I read to them. And I went down and I got my hugs. I needed my hugs every morning. But don't ask me to spend more than 5 minutes in kindergarten. I can't do it, So you gotta be sure that the kids you're gonna be working with are gonna be well served by you, that you have the talents and gifts to serve a particular age group, and that and this is an important thing, that you're gonna get satisfaction from that age group. Because teaching's hard work, and there's a lot of days you go home and you're not very satisfied. But then there's just that one thing that happens that makes it all worthwhile, So
It's the kid that gets it, that like you've been working it and working with, and they did it by themselves. They did the whole worksheet. They got it all right. Like, yes. And like it's work. I mean, just like the kids, when you're with them, you feel like they're like your siblings. I mean, maybe a little different, but like being with the kids, like you're gonna get experience that you're not gonna get from a book when you work with the kids. You're gonna know, what am I gonna do when 2 kids in my class don't get along? What am I gonna do with a difficult parent? Like just all kinds of things that you don't even think about. What are you gonna do with like kids who don't celebrate certain holidays or stuff like that? Like it's just the things that you don't think about, but you learn when you're there. You see, ask a lot of questions, like take a lot of notes. That's something I wish I did more of in the beginning. Like take notes everywhere you go, because every teacher does it differently, and you can learn something from even like the teachers that maybe like you don't want to be, or just as much as the teachers that you do want to be. So take a lot of notes.
And these experiences are integrated throughout, not every education coursework, but many of them. And so there are going to be different kinds of experiences, and as these folks said, different kinds of schools, because we want folks to have a well-rounded idea of what's going on in the private world, in the public world, in the urban world, and the suburban world. So they have a well-rounded sense of where do they want to end up in their own careers. And then it all culminates in what we call the professional year. And we like this particular model, and so let me explain a little bit how it might be different from others you've heard about. In our professional year, students do their what we call pre-student teaching in the fall semester, and that is connected with a course, a methods course. And they are assigned to a building for 1 full day a week, and they're with a mentor teacher 1 full day a week. And they have a university supervisor, and probably not the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of the semester, but starting about mid-semester, the 1 day that they're there, they're teaching. They're planning the lessons and they're teaching. If that experience is successful, which it most oftentimes is, they stay in the same classroom with the same teacher and the same kids for their student teaching. So that when they begin student teaching in January, they hit the ground running and they start teaching right away. They know the kids. They've already established a relationship with their students. They've already created a relationship with their mentor. They know the curriculum. They know the culture. They've been immersed in that school. And so come January, it's a seamless move right into student teaching.
I mean, it's just so nice to like already know your cooperating teacher. Like you know what the routines of the classroom are before you get there. You know who gets along with whom, and like some of the parents. You know the staff already in the school. Like it is just so comforting to already like have those relationships by the time you're taking over yourself. Because you can already think of the things that like you might not know if you were just coming in for the first time.
The biggest thing I noticed was like the kid, like getting to know the kids for those first, I mean, you're there like 14 weeks the first semester, so 14 days really. So getting to know the kids, you have 14 days to kind of build a rapport with these kids, like figure out, okay, what's he interested in? How can I teach this kid? So that when you come back in January and the kid's like, well, where you been? Like, what's going on? And you kind of like know the kids, so you're understanding like who needs extra support, who maybe could be like a peer teacher who's going to be able to like help other kids out. So developing that rapport is, I think, one of the biggest things that first, like the pre-student teaching semester. Getting to know your kids is probably the one thing I had the best time with. I thought it was a blast.
David, you make me so proud. Because that's a core principle of our program, is this whole notion of rapport and knowing your kids. It's all about relationships, right? I mean, one of the things we stress with our students is, it's great if you know your content knowledge. We want you to know your content knowledge. But if you don't know how to teach that content and you don't know who you're teaching it to, you're not going to be a good teacher. You can have really good pedagogical skills, you can be a master planner, but if you don't know what you're teaching and you don't know who you're teaching it to, you're not going to be successful. You've got to have all three, but the most important one is that rapport, because if you know your students and there is a relationship of respect and care between you, the kids will do whatever you want them to do and they'll learn. So true. Got it. Any other questions about our clinical work? Because that really is a key part of the program. And
I think it's the best part, personally.
I agree.
I really do.
Definitely learn the most.
Do you have opportunities to do that, like in Cleveland City Schools?
I have one of my student teachers is in Elmira, on the near west side of Cleveland.
One of my friends is student teaching.
That's a Brody is yeah.
Do you guys
So is
pick
Vicky
one?
Sarah.
Do they get to pick one of their own?
Do you get to pick? They used to. I don't know. Do you
Kind
know?
of. I mean, if you have like, for instance, if you know, like the kid we were just talking about, Brody, he wanted to go to the inner city, the student teacher. So he came in and he was like, listen, I really want to go to an inner city school. I'm like, okay, that's great. Like, we'll get you in there. I mean, so he didn't pick like his school, but he picked, I want to go to this urban setting. And that's kind of, I mean, I knew I had an urban experience before that through service and through like observations. And I was like, well, I want to try out like suburban area. So you kind of like, I would say you kind of pick where, like the area you want to go. You're not going to pick the school. Good area.
One of the things we've been moving towards, when I first came to Carroll, we had student teachers everywhere. I mean, you know, out as far east as Painesville, down as far south as Twinsburg, as far west as Bay Village. And then we had one person here and one person there. And one of the things we've been trying to do the last few years is to establish partnerships with school districts so that we can send a cadre of students into that district. So for example, in Mayfield, where David is, there are 4 of our student teachers in the middle school. I think there's five
You're at
at
five.
Garrity. So we're trying, because then that way, when the students go back to their seminar that they take with student teaching, they've got some common experiences that they can talk about and debrief. And it's also, then we're able to go, because the other thing we've tried to do is, in the past, we had a lot of part-time folks supervise our student teachers, and what we've been doing more recently is more of our full-time faculty are going out and doing the supervision, which is also kind of cool because you get to teach the folks, and then you get to follow them and see, so is my teaching working? You know? And so to your question, yes, to a degree, but we tend to start looking at certain districts everywhere. What else we have?
Can you talk about what you guys do outside the classroom as well?
That's a good question.
Other activities you're involved in?
Yeah. Teaching related or not?
Not really, with the teacher. I'm John Carroll.
Okay. This is kind of embarrassing. I have found that nearly everyone at John Carroll, it just kind of happens. You get involved in something. Everyone I know is involved in at least one thing. Personally, I'm involved in Greek life. I do We the People campus ministry. I'm a tour guide. I work for the wrestling team. I was in a choir group. I was in something else. I don't know. It's like dominoes. You bite off as much as you can chew. But service is a really big part of our school. Our mission is men and women for others, and as cheesy as it sounds, that is like my motto of life. I absolutely love that phrase. I was telling Dr. Storrs, it's so embarrassing. I started crying. You're welcome. Thanks. I started crying because like what they said, it's really hard to like actually convey like how much John Carroll means, but everyone is involved in something, and there's something for everyone. There's sports, there are singing groups, there are, you can be involved in student government, you can be involved with like religious things, you can go on trips, you can study abroad. There really is something for everyone. There's a lot of things like that are outside John Carroll, so you're not going to be like just stranded to your school. They're really good about like offering things to students, like you can get tickets for sports games for like way discounted. The school takes you to like Cedar Point. Every year they do like a Halloween weekend thing. They offer like a ticket for $10 where you can go. You get a meal, they provide transportation, and you get a ticket to Cedar Point, which I think is awesome. But there's always something to do. You can go to Little Italy. Like, I don't know. I'm just like never bored here. So, sorry, that was really annoying.
She does more than I do. I really focused on kind of two things throughout my like 4 years here. So I came in, I knew I wanted to play basketball. I played basketball for all 4 years. I was a captain junior and senior year, so I just finished up doing that in March or February. Our season ended. That's obviously a big time commitment, so I didn't have like as much time, especially with student teaching this semester, to like go off and do a bunch of other things. So that was like my big time commitment coming into college. The second thing I did was also kind of basketball related and service related. It's called Carroll Ballers. What you do is you go down to the juvenile detention center in Cuyahoga County, and you work with the juveniles in there. So I was working with 18 to 21 year olds that were in prison for anything that you could imagine. But that's a small group discussion for the first hour that you're there. So again, you're talking to the kids, like building relationships with them, and then the second hour you go and play basketball with them. So there's, I think, normally like 10-ish John Carroll students go down there per night. You kind of split up. There's like 3 or 4 teams. So there's like, it would be like you and another person from John Carroll playing with like 3 or 4 people that are in the prison, which that's been really cool. That's had a huge impact on my life and kind of my experience here. I still keep in touch with a couple of the kids there. Once, because they get transferred out, that's just kind of like their holding ground. So they get transferred out. I still keep in touch with like some of them, writing letters and stuff like that. So that's been like a huge, impactful thing for me that I've grown to love that.
Oh, can I ask something about that?
Yeah.
Well, are girls like involved in that as much as like?
They actually, so it started out just guys. It
Yeah.
was just one night a week. It started out just guys, and then it's expanded so much. Like the first semester they did it, it was like 10 people. Then the next semester they expanded it, and there was like just hundreds of people wanted to sign up, and they could only take like 40 because they didn't have enough room. So they've expanded it to be, I think they go down 6 days a week. Girls go down either once or twice. I'm not completely sure, but the girls are involved now. So there's 10 to 20 girls per semester that go down.
Yeah. So do they play basketball? Or do they do like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both.
Cool.
Yep.
There's another program that actually I feel like a lot of education majors don't really know about enough, but something called We the People. And with We the People, that's a service organization, and they go into inner city schools, and you don't have to be an education major to do it, but I think it's a really good experience. You teach kids about the Constitution, and I remember being like kind of scared from that. Like I was like, I don't know enough about it to like be able to teach it, but they give you a textbook, and like they have once a week meetings where you can plan your lesson for the inner city schools that you go into, and you're with usually 1 or 2 other John Carroll students, and you can teach lessons in the classroom. So it's just like another way to practice like planning lessons and getting like different kinds of experiences with different kinds of kids. And you'll find that like no matter where you go, kids are kids. So they're fun, they make you laugh. They really, really like the John Carroll students. The kids get really excited when you're there. So that's another cool thing you can do to set yourself apart.
I did that too, I forgot.
Yeah, there's one for younger ages, and there's also one for older kids, Mike, you good?
I'm a Project Citizen, and actually we go down to Shaw High School in the city, and we teach sophomores about public policy. So it's through the same With People program, but just there's 3 different ages.
Yeah, I did 4th grade because I'm early, but you can do high school. My brother is, he's an education major here as well. He's a junior. He's high school, so he does along with Mike. I think he's in Mike's group.
Yeah.
Other questions you have for any of them?
As an athlete, how much free time do you have after you have to do practices in your classes and do this and meetings with the team, do all this extracurricular?
You find time. It's really, you find something that you're passionate about and you make time for it. So the Cure Ballers thing is only one night a week. So my thing was like, I can take 3 hours out of my week to go down and build relationships with these kids who need it. To be honest with you, you don't. It is a big time commitment. Practice is 2 to 3 hours a day. Plus, if you're taking 18 credit hours, or a lot of you will be because there's a lot of coursework. And then on top of that, your observations and stuff. But it's not too bad. You find time. You make time. There's a lot of hours in a week. You just have so much free time in college. You have a lot of free time, so you have to while you're in season especially, you're kind of like, okay, I know I have practice at this time. I need to get my work done before practice because then maybe I'll have night class so you have to plan out your schedule. But you kind of get used to it.
Mike, you could speak to that a little bit too. I work for the wrestling team, as I said, so I actually travel with the team to every tournament, but he's on the wrestling team, also an education major, so.
Yeah, I'm the same though. Like it's a big time commitment, but as I said, I'm involved in Project Citizen, and I'm getting involved in the admissions office. So I still have the ability to go out and pick a few things that I'm really passionate about and try to make my mark where I can. Now, I can't be Anne Marie and list every co-curricular program.
No, Mike is great.
But no, definitely as an athlete, you still have the ability to make your mark where you want to make your mark.
It's like hard to work freshman year,
I don't think so. I personally feel like I do better when I'm busy. So if I know that I have things, I'm more motivated to get my work done. So sometimes I like being busy. I think it's just about your time management skills. You guys will find that really quickly when you get to college. Time management's really important. It's gonna be really tempting because you live in a land of people your age. So sometimes you have to figure out when's a good time that works for you. When and where do you get your most work done? How are you productive? Stuff like that. But I know a lot of freshmen that work. It's just how busy you are and how much you think you can handle. So I think it's a personal thing. You agree?
Yeah, I didn't work my freshman year. I worked my sophomore and junior years. But it's generally, if you're working through John Carroll, you're not going to be working more than 10 hours a week.
Yeah.
So if you're working outside of John Carroll, then there's no guarantee. But a lot of people do work. A lot of people do work. Do you want to touch on it?
Yeah, I've worked all my semesters at John Carroll. I'm also an education major. And my freshman year, I was a driver for CSSA, which is our service office on campus. So I drove to different service sites. And then I also babysat 2 mornings a week. There's tons of babysitting opportunities around John Carroll. Tons of opportunities. But yeah, it's very doable. I have 3 jobs right now, and I'm in my 2nd semester junior year. You can work.
Word of mouth. I don't know.
Babysitting. You can also post in the Career Center. You can post your name, and a lot of alumni in the area will go to the Career Center to find that. Yes. Word of mouth. A girl in my sorority graduated, and so I took over her babysitting. So it just kind of that. But the Career Center is an awesome way to find babysitting jobs.
And a lot of them are walkable too, which is
neat.
I babysit around here, and I took my kids to the CAP the other day.
Yeah, to the library.
It was really fun.
Well, thank you guys so much. What we have coming up for you next, lunch is next. And luckily we're here in the same building as well. So when we're done here, we're going to head back up to the intramural gym where lunch is set up. Throughout the day though, this is kind of a choose your own adventure for the rest of the day. We do have a lot of specialized tour opportunities, basically starting from now through the rest of the day there in terms of specific things that you want to see on campus. You're not required to do an entire campus tour. If there are just some specific items that you want to see, and those are all listed in your programs there. I would promote the neighborhood bus tour as well, because I will be giving you 3 o'clock neighborhood bus tour as well. On Lolly, the trolley there. Another thing to highlight though, the campus mystery immersion experience presentation, that's a great way to see all the different service and immersion experience that John Carroll provides, just to get a sense of how extensive those are and all the different opportunities there. Celebration Live is what you hear going on right now. In the atrium there, we have a lot of our different student performance groups that are going to be on a rotating basis throughout the afternoon there, just to get a sense of our different performing arts groups on the stage there in the atrium. The Academic Services Opportunities Fair is a really, really good way to see a lot of our different academic organizations as well, and what they do and how you can get involved with that. The Student and Parent Lounges too. The Student Lounge is here. The Parent Lounge is over in Rodman Hall. Rodman Hall will also be open all day for financial aid and admissions one-on-ones too. If you have some specific questions you want to talk to us about, we'll be over there as well. And then finally, something that we have too, the Ask Us Anything panel. That will be over in the Donahue Auditorium at the end of the day. We have a huge cross-section of individuals from across the university, and it really is Ask Us Anything. And whoever best suited to answer that question on the panel will do so. But like I said, choose your own adventure, and feel free to talk to anyone in the white shirts, anyone that you see around. We have a lot of volunteers and staff here to help. But as of right now, we are going to head back up to the Intramural Gym for lunch. So.
Can I just say good luck to everybody, enjoy the rest of your senior year.